All right, welcome everybody. Thank y'all so much for staying. Is everyone enjoying lunch? Yeah. It smells amazing. So hopefully y'all will keep your appetites and get to check out this cool recipe I have at the end. So, like Dr. Champagne said, I'm not a doctor. I am Brooke Shoonenberg. I'm a dietitian at Women's Center for Wellness in their outpatient nutrition department. So, how many of you have heard of the term clean eating? Okay, does anyone want to be brave and offer up their own definition of what they think it means?
Eating food without that hasn't been processed a lot, that doesn't have chemicals added to it, that was grown sustainably, that's close to home from the farm.
That beautifully said. I don't think I could have said it better myself. There's actually no... Oh, you couldn't hear it? Oh. Well, basically, she said, food that hasn't been processed, that's been grown close to home, sustainably grown, that sort of thing. And I'd like to point out that there really is no official definition of clean eating. So what you see today is pretty much my own interpretation and what I've gathered through the literature. So this is just an overview of what I'm going to be talking about, essentially trying to define clean eating as the best that I can, talking about what I call the Eat Clean Pyramid, talk about food processing and what it is, talking about specific ingredients that I would encourage people to limit or avoid if possible, budget bites, so ways to eat clean on a budget, because I know that's all important, finances are very important, and then some food and diet trends that promote clean eating and the pros and cons of those. Okay, so eating clean, what is it? Essentially, it's eating foods that are as close to their natural state as possible. What it is not, it's not focusing on eating more or less of any specific type of food or nutrient. So it's not saying, oh, you have to eat low calorie, or you have to eat more protein, or you have to eat more vitamin A, or whatever. It's just about eating a good, balanced diet of whole foods. And so this is a little something I kind of made up. It's called the Eat Clean Pyramid. And does anybody remember the old food guide pyramid? Oh, yeah. So this is kind of modeled in the same way. So if you remember the old food guide pyramid, what was at the bottom was what you were supposed to eat the most of. And then as you inched closer to the top, that was the foods that you were supposed to eat less of or in moderation. And so this pyramid models that in the fact that the bottom of the pyramid, the base, is what you want to eat the most of. And that would be things like your raw fruits, your raw vegetables, nuts and seeds. Or those are things that don't necessarily have to be processed to be consumed in their natural form. And then as you move upwards, you have things like whole grains, raw meats, beans and legumes, hormone-free dairy. So these are foods that typically have to undergo some type of processing so that we can eat them. And then, of course, at the very top are our packaged products, so things that are convenient or that have been processed to a further degree from their natural state. All right, so there are varying degrees of food processing. You can go all the way from none to minimal processing, all the way up to high or ultra degrees of processing. And like I said earlier, there are certain foods that can be eaten in their natural form with no processing. So if any of y'all have that little card that I was kind of handing out at the beginning, an example that I used was an apple. So let's say you go to an apple orchard and you pick an apple off the tree. That is an example of a food that you can eat in a non-processed form. So let's say we take that same apple and we bring it home and we wash it, we peel it, we slice it. That's actually considered minimal processing, believe it or not. So it's just not to say that all processing is bad, it's just that some foods have to be processed more than others to be eaten. So what does minimally processed mean? Minimally processed means that it has changed its shape or form from where it began. So like I said with the apple, you didn't pick the apple off the tree, peeled and sliced and washed, right? So that is minimal processing. Another way to look at it would be to think of if something was added to it. And the amount of food that's added to it, or the chemicals that are added to it, or the amount or degree in which it was changed will tell you whether it goes from being minimally processed all the way to high or ultra processed. So some examples of minimally processed foods, things like unrefined whole grains. Let's think of this example. So you have wheat growing in the field, right? That would be its natural form. Well, you can't really eat it that way, so what do? The manufacturers take it, and they take the whole grain, and then they make, let's say, whole wheat bread or whole wheat pasta. So that food has been processed from its original state, but it's still maintaining its nutritional value. So let's say we take that same grain and we remove the bran and the germ, so basically the parts that contain the fiber and the B vitamins, and you're left with that starchy part. And we make bunny bread, or we make cookies, or we make, desserts or whatever. That's an example of taking a food from its natural state and processing it to a degree where it's lost nutritional value and it's completely different from where it started. Other foods that are considered minimally processed would be dairy that's not treated with growth hormones. This is actually an example of a food that has to be minimally processed so that it can be safe for consumption. So we know that raw milk might contain harmful bacteria and that sort of thing. So we pasteurize it to make it safe. So that's an example of minimal processing. Oils, raw cuts of meat, beans and legumes. You have to soak and cook beans and legumes so that they can be eaten. So just a few examples. And then you've got your ultra or your high processed food. So basically something that's been converted far from its natural state, like I was talking to you about with the grains, and you start with wheat in the field and you end up with bunny bread on the shelf. So whenever I think of highly processed foods, two words come to mind. Anything that's in a package, or anything that seems super convenient and maybe a little too good to be true. So how many of you have heard of stay away from the inner aisles of the grocery store? Oh yeah. How many of us actually do that? You do? I'm naughty. Sometimes you'll find me there. But that's because even things in the inner aisles, are they processed? Yes, they're in a package, so they've been processed, but not all processed foods are created equal, and that's kind of the take-home message of this slide, or of the presentation in general. So, how much is too much? Some processing is necessary. Like I said, with the milk, you have to pasteurize it so that it's safe. Let the ingredients tell the story. So how many of y'all look at not just the nutrition facts label, but the ingredients? Oh yeah. My husband hates shopping with me because it takes me about 2 hours. There's so many new products on the market, and there's so many varieties of the same thing, and it's a little overwhelming. So I do my own little detective work, and I compare the labels myself. So first question I ask myself is, how many ingredients are in the product? So is there a right or wrong number as far as how many ingredients you should limit? No. Typically, the first 5 ingredients are the ones that the product contains the most of, so that's one way you can look at it. But the shorter the list, the better. And then, can you pronounce them? Have y'all ever looked at a label and said, what is that? Why is it in my food? If you cannot pronounce it, do not eat it. That is a great rule. Do you recognize whole foods? So when you look at a label, are you looking at whole wheat, or are you looking at whole oats or whatever? I have a little example that I'm about to show y'all. And then, are there preservatives, artificial colors, food dyes, that sort of thing? Have y'all ever noticed that on the label? It makes you wonder, why do you have to flavor this with something artificial when we've got all these great things? All right, so looking at labels. Up here, I just picked out 2 examples of oatmeal. So what do y'all notice about the one on the left? Exactly. Can you pronounce everything? What's one of the things that y'all notice about the one on the left compared to the one on the right? I look at the artificial flavors for sure, and then I look at the longer list, and even though a lot of them are vitamins, most people wouldn't realize that. And so you have to wonder, why are they having to add all these vitamins back? I thought that was already supposed to be in there because it was a whole grain, right? So this is a perfect example of how you can look at two different products and see them in a different light. So even though they might have the same nutritional value, these two products very well might have the same amount of calories. But if you're looking at maybe what's a cleaner product, then this, looking at the ingredients, might tell you a bigger picture. All right, so ingredients to limit or avoid. I just want to say that this is kind of my own personal list, so there is some bias in it, and I understand that not all of these things can be avoided completely. You know, we live in a society where time is definitely of the essence, and we don't all have very much of it. But the point is, if you can at least limit it, everything in moderation. I know that's a broad term, and what does moderation mean? We can talk about that. But the first thing on my list is partially hydrogenated oils. So have y'all heard of this before? Oh, yeah. Okay. Why? Does anyone know why it's bad? Bad? That's right. Okay. So partially hydrogenated oils, I kind of think as synonymous to trans fat. I know we've all heard of trans fat, and there's actually a huge push right now to get trans fats out of our food. So they were originally designed because saturated fat was this evil monster, and they created this, and lo and behold, it made things have a much longer shelf life, which is great, right, because we don't want our food to spoil. But partially hydrogenated oils, we know, negatively impact our cholesterol and our heart health. So it's one that, even if it says no trans fat, read the ingredients list and look for these words, and if they're there, limit or avoid. And you can find these in a lot of like dessert products, cakes and cookies and stuff like that. Artificial sweeteners, I know this one is of hot debate. So there's 4 main ones that I think most people know of. There's acesulfame potassium. There is aspartame, which I believe is equal. Is that right? Yeah. Saccharin, which is good old sweet and low, and then sucralose, which is Splenda. So I think the one that's under the most heated debate is aspartame. And in fact, I was reading that Pepsi, I believe, is trying to take aspartame out of its diet drinks, and I'm sure Diet Coke will be soon to follow. The reason that they think artificial sweeteners are bad, and I put everything in quotes because I don't like to really necessarily call things good or bad, but they're linking artificial sweeteners to metabolic syndrome, increased abdominal fat in women. So just some things to think about. Does that mean that drinking a Diet Coke is going to harm you? Not necessarily, but again, there's that word moderation. So if you're drinking a fridge pack a day or whatever, you might want to try and cut it back to 1 and go from there. And then, of course, you have artificial colors, so food dyes, that F, D, and C, red and blue and yellow. I don't know why they insist on coloring things because I don't care what color my food is. I just care what it tastes like. But, and then along with that is artificial flavors, too. Preservatives. Have any of y'all seen these acronyms on the label? TBHQ, BHT, BHA. I see these a lot in breakfast cereals. I'm sure they're in a lot of other packaged products, but it's basically to keep the food more shelf stable. Monosodium glutamate, I think of a Chinese buffet, not to pick on them, but they're kind of infamous for MSG, but a lot of people tend to be MSG sensitive, might cause headaches and that sort of thing. And then sodium nitrates and nitrites. So a lot of people don't realize, but these are actually naturally occurring in a lot of foods. So I'm not picking on the natural ones, but more so the ones that are added to things like deli meat, bacon, sausage, hot dogs. There's actually been a link to those types of foods, the processed meats, and cancer. So definitely limiting or avoiding those as much as possible. All right, and then because I get a lot of questions on sweeteners and what's best, I did a little special slide to kind of differentiate between the ones that are nutritive, which means they provide calories, and the non-nutritive, which means they don't. So the nutritive sweeteners, it could be white table sugar, it could be raw cane sugar, turbinado, brown sugar, agave nectar, honey, molasses, maple syrup. They all provide calories. So that's the bottom line. And then the non-nutritive sweeteners, they provide minimal to no calories, and then there's 2 types. There's the artificial ones that we just talked about that I encourage people to limit or avoid, and then there's the natural ones like stevia. Have y'all heard of stevia? Monk fruit is another one that I think is a little less popular. And so the take-home message for this slide is sugar is sugar is sugar, but there are varying degrees to which it's processed. So maple syrup, honey is definitely less processed than white table sugar that started from sugar cane and then it went through a bleaching process and this and that and the other. So when you're talking about clean eating, a lot of people might encourage you to avoid the white table sugar and the artificial sweeteners. Okay, organic. How many of y'all, does anyone try to buy organic? Does anyone mind sharing, if you do buy organic, the reason why? Okay, and why did you buy the organic milk? Okay. It tasted good? So organic really refers to the way that a food is grown or processed. So when you're thinking about produce, essentially farmers try to use maybe more natural sources of fertilizers. They rotate their crops. It's very much tied to the environment. If you're talking about a cow, what type of feed are they fed, that sort of thing. And the take-home message from this slide is that organic food is not necessarily healthier. There's no extra nutritional benefits from eating organic produce or food versus conventionally grown food or produce. The big difference is the pesticides. So if you're someone that's trying to avoid pesticide exposure, buying organic will definitely help you decrease your intake of those. But as far as vitamins and minerals and antioxidants, there's really no true difference. And if you're confused about the labeling, I put up this little chart, and on that handout that I provided, there's all the websites where you can get more information if you want to look more into it. All right, so to eat or not to eat organic, that is the question, right? So this is a list that I like to refer to a lot. It's really fun. Someone else did all the work for me, which is always nice. So the Environmental Working Group is a company that looks into things like pesticides or additives and even in things like skincare products. So I like to look at their list called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. Have y'all heard of this before? Okay, well, essentially what they're doing is looking at pesticide exposure in certain fruits and vegetables. And so they put out a list called the Dirty Dozen, which are essentially the top 12 produce items that have the most amount of pesticides. Typically, these are the ones that you would eat the skin on. So that's one way to look at it. And then the Clean 15 are foods that had the least amount of pesticide exposure. So if you were thinking, okay, well, I want to buy organic, but I don't know if I can afford to buy everything, then this is a great list to refer to because some things it doesn't matter. Like, for example, asparagus is on the Clean 15. So you might not want to spend your money there, but you might want to spend the extra couple bucks and get some organic apples. But again, remember that there is no nutritional difference. None, zero, zip. So the benefits outweigh the risk. I don't want y'all to remember that. So the organic apple, conventionally grown apple, same nutrition, same everything. One just may or may not have more pesticides than the other. And they update this list pretty frequently, and its website is on the card as well. All right, and I already said this, so the health benefits outweigh the risk. So, and eat a variety, because eating a variety of foods, not only you're going to get different nutrients from different foods, but it will also help with your exposure to those pesticides. And then if you can buy organic foods on the Dirty Dozen list, then that's great. If you can't, no worries. All right, GMOs. Who's heard about GMOs? Oh, yeah. Does anyone know what they are? Roundup. Right. I think that there's a lot of debate on GMOs. I get emails all the time. They're trying to pass these different labeling acts. Should we know if this food has been genetically modified? Should we not? And that's what GMO stands for. It stands for genetically modified organism. Okay? And so what that means is that they have taken a food and they have changed its genetic material in a way that is not natural, essentially. And there's a lot of reasons that they do this. So y'all know that our population in this world is growing, right? I mean, it's growing quickly, and we have billions of people in this world. And so one of the reasons that they were doing genetic modification is so that we can feed the world, essentially. We have a lot of people to feed. And when you genetically modify something, for example, corn, so they might be able to genetically modify corn in a way that it can resist heat, that it can resist pests, that it can grow better. There's some genetic modifications to salmon where they can grow more quickly, so they mature more quickly, so we can eat it. So there's a lot of different reasons for the genetic modification. I don't think that there's enough research of whether or not to say it's harmful to human health. There are some concerns, but it hasn't been around long enough to really say, yes, if you eat genetically modified food, this will happen. So my take-home message is I would avoid it if I can, but we don't really know the harm, the benefits or the risk yet. So take this one with a grain of salt and just educate yourself on it. And this label that I put is one that you might see as part of the non-GMO project. And that will tell you whether or not your food has been genetically modified. All right. Who in here eats on a budget? I do. I mean, how many people think that eating healthy is more expensive? I mean, I can see it both ways, because if I can go through a drive-through and get a cheeseburger for $1, or I can go to the store maybe buy a couple apples for $1, you kind of got to think about it. But there are ways to do it, to eat healthy on a budget. The first one is create a budget. How much do you want to spend on your food? The second one is to plan ahead. Have y'all heard, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail? Remember that, repeat it. That is your new mantra. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So definitely meal plan if you can. This is going to help you avoid drive-thrus. It's going to help you prevent getting home saying, what am I going to eat? And if you have a plan A, which I call plan perfect, no one's life is perfect, you have a plan B. And so that's plan no excuse-itis. All right, and then rule number 3 is reduce your waste. Okay, so check your grocery ads and your sales papers. Make produce the star of the plate. So have y'all heard of the Choose My Plate model, where half your plate is fruits and vegetables? I was reading an article this morning, and it actually said that there is this thing called telomeres in our body, and they shorten as we get older. But one of the studies that I was reading said that the more produce, the more fruits and vegetables and whole grains that you eat, you can actually lengthen those telomeres, which I thought was pretty cool. So you're saying I can extend my life by eating more fruits and vegetables? Well, that's easy. So definitely make produce the star of the plate. And then go meatless once a week. Have y'all ever done this? Yeah, well, I guess we're kind of sort of doing it on Fridays if you're Catholic and you participate in Lent. But also think about, besides fish and seafood, you have eggs, you have beans. Quinoa is actually a great grain that's got a lot of protein in it. So going meatless once a week will definitely help with your budget. And then reduce your reliance on convenience items. Believe it or not, convenience items can be expensive. And when we're talking about fruits and vegetables, bagged lettuce, shredded coleslaw, frozen vegetables, all those things, you pay the price for convenience. Even things like boneless, skinless chicken breast versus a whole chicken, you pay the price for convenience. So it's up to you whether or not you have the time to debone and deskin a chicken or not. I'd rather spend my money on getting the stuff that's already done, but it's up to you and what your budget allows. And then plan ahead and buy and cook in bulk. Does anyone buy and cook in bulk? Awesome. What do you cook? What do you cook in bulk?
Beans,
Mm-hmm.
salad if I can, other vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm doing a vegetable medley,
Uh-huh.
then I would do more than one meal.
Okay.
And then I freeze it.
Okay. I think it's extremely smart, especially things like grains, beans, those things that you can cook in bulk and freeze individually. It makes a lot of sense. And buy produce that's in season. That's a link that's also on your card. Fruits and Veggies More Matters. They have a complete list of what's in season for winter, spring, summer, and fall. Fruits and vegetables that are in season are typically less expensive and at their nutritional peak. So even if you buy them and you freeze them, and that is a form of minimal processing, that's okay, then you'll still get nutritional benefits throughout the year. And remember, if you buy healthy food, but you don't eat it, it's wasting, so it's not of value. Well, I got ahead of myself. And then creating new meals from leftovers. All right, so eating clean pantry, essentially whole, unprocessed foods, so raw fruits and vegetables, frozen as long as it doesn't have sugar or salt added. Even some canned items, they're getting a lot better with that as far as not adding sodium and that sort of thing. I know some people are worried about BPA, which is the lining or whatever that leaches into the food. I still don't think that the nutritional value is affected much by canning as long as it's no or low sodium. Nuts and seeds, unrefined grains, dried beans and legumes, that's so on and so forth. And then diet trends. So I'm sure y'all may have heard about some of these diets, paleo, Whole30, gluten-free. They all promote clean eating, and I'm sure these are not the only ones. The biggest problem that I have with these is that they restrict food groups. So if there is no medical reason why you would restrict, so if you're not lactose intolerant or if you don't have celiac disease, I do not encourage people to restrict food groups. It makes it harder to sustain over time. So that's my personal opinion and take-home message. And I'd be happy to talk with y'all more about this after if anyone has questions. And so in conclusion, this is a quote from one of my favorite books. And his quote was, "Eat food, not too much, and mostly plants." I think these are extremely profound, simple words to live by. And eating foods in their natural state will prevent the overconsumption of things that we worry about, like sugar, salt, fat, chemicals. So, and it's not difficult, and that's what the little recipe that I'm going to demonstrate will show you. So, real quick, can y'all hear me? Okay. So, how many of y'all eat lean cuisines? Lean cuisines. Okay, well, I'll raise my hand. I've been known to eat a lean cuisine or two. Okay, y'all caught me. So how long does it normally take to heat up a lean cuisine? Yeah, like anywhere from like 2 to 5 minutes. So in that same amount of time, I'm going to make a no-cook, budget-friendly, clean eating recipe. So all I did, and this is on the back of that handout, what I'm doing is I'm just taking stuff that hopefully you already have in your pantry. I'm using raw baby spinach. If you have romaine lettuce, if you have arugula, or whatever, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to just put that in a bowl. Simple, simple. All right. Then I chose citrus because citrus is a great winter fruit. And then all I'm going to do is cut the rind off and just make it into little segments. So I picked citrus, again, because it's in season, so it was relatively cheap. But if it's the summer and you've got strawberries, or if you've got some lovely blueberries or whatever, you can always use that too. And so I definitely take this recipe not for face value, make it your own and use whatever you have at home. Okay, so I'm just cutting this up. Throw that on top. I did orange and grapefruit, but it's whatever you have. And then one of the things that I like the most about this recipe is that I'm making my own dressing. Does anyone do that? Yes? Yeah. Woohoo! Go ahead, girl. I love making my own salad dressing. Has anyone ever tried or thought that maybe it was too much trouble? Well, I got some honey right here, a little sweetness. I'm using red wine vinegar, but I love apple cider vinegar. That's another take-home message. Use what you have. If you don't have red wine vinegar, don't go buy it. You can use apple cider. And then I just have some extra virgin olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is great for marinades. I wouldn't cook with it, though. If you're going to cook, I would just do a regular olive oil. Extra virgin is pretty heat sensitive. So I'm just taking a little olive oil, a little honey for some sweetness. If you don't have honey, use maple syrup. Use a little bit of raw cane sugar, whatever you have. So this is my red wine vinegar. I'm being naughty, I'm not measuring, but I kind of just taste it and go with it. Is anyone timing me? Because I'm curious to know how much time I'm taking. You are? Okay. The pressure's on. Okay. Let's see. All right, a little salt, a little pepper. How many of y'all have tuna? Just like packaged tuna. Is it like so boring and you dread eating it, but you just do it because it's there? All I did was I bought the tuna in a pack. Yes, it's processed. I did not go out and catch this tuna this morning and fillet it, and that's okay. But I looked at the ingredients, and so I see light tuna, water, vegetable broth, salt. 4 ingredients. I can pronounce them all. I know what they are. That's all I need to know. So I'm just going to open up my package, put it in there. Whoop, there we go. And what I like to do is I like to take a little bit of my dressing and put that on the tuna and kind of give it some flavor. So it kind of helps take away that fishy taste. And then last but not least, let's see. I'm just taking some red onion if you want to do that. Just some slivers of red onion. Come on. As long as they don't make you cry. If you don't like onion, leave it off. Simple enough. All right. Put that on there. I put pistachios. If you want to use sunflower seeds, almonds, cashews, walnuts, whatever. I just like texture, so that's my personal opinion. And then all I'm going to do is take the rest of my dressing, dress my salad, and actually, you know what might be a good idea is instead of putting all the toppings on the dressing is to dress just the lettuce first and then add the toppings after that. So maybe next time I'll take my own advice. Yeah, just that, because that's really what doesn't, needs the most flavor is the lettuce. And another thing I like to do is put my lettuce in Tupperware and shake it with the dressing, so that way, whenever you shake it all about, you distribute it a little bit better and you don't need quite as much. All right, so there it is. How long did that take me?
6 minutes.
Dang, 6 minutes. Well, that's because I was talking. I'm not a good multitasker. So anyways, in the same time you could have made a lean cuisine with all of those 90 ingredients, you could have made a lovely, no-cook, budget-friendly tuna citrus salad. I hope y'all enjoy. Thank you very much.